Sunday brunch at the Bennett estate looked like a luxury magazine spread come to life. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, gliding across polished marble floors and catching the sharp sparkle of imported crystal mimosa flutes. The long dining table, carved from dark mahogany, stretched like a throne for wealth and ego. Every wall displayed expensive oil paintings my father had chosen not for beauty, but for price tags. Nothing in this house whispered elegance. It screamed money. Victoria sat at the head of the table, glowing in a cream designer dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Diamonds framed her smug smile. She looked exactly like what my parents loved, polished, loud, and publicly impressive. I wore a simple black blazer and tailored slacks. No labels, no diamonds, no approval. "Another mimosa, Miss Bennett," the housekeeper asked softly. Victoria gave a lazy nod without looking at her. "None for Sarah," my mother said before I could speak. "She has to drive back to her apartment." The word apartment rolled off her tongue like something unpleasant. I didn't react. I never did anymore. Under the table, my phone vibrated. Notification. Asterisk final acquisition contract approved. I locked the screen, calm. My father cleared his throat, setting down his sterling silver fork like a judge about to deliver a verdict. "As you both know, your grandfather's estate has finally been settled." Two envelopes appeared in his hand, one thick, one thin. Victoria straightened. I already knew. "Victoria," he said warmly, "you've shown real business commitment working at Bennett Investments these past 5 years." Commitment? That was a generous word for showing up late and letting assistants think for you. "You will receive the family mansion," he continued, sliding the thick envelope to her, "along with the primary investment portfolio." Victoria gasped theatrically. "Daddy, it's perfect. James and I can move in right after the wedding." Then my father turned to me, and the warmth vanished. "Sarah, considering your unconventional career choices, we believe a modest inheritance suits you better." The thin envelope stopped in front of me. "The studio apartment on Cedar Street is now yours." Victoria laughed. "That's actually generous. What do you even do again? Something with computers." "Property management," I said quietly. My mother scoffed. "Managing that tiny complex on the east side is not a career. Victoria manages entire developments." My phone buzzed again. Global Towers acquisition. Funds transferred **. I sipped water, hiding a smile. "Perhaps," my father added, "it's time you joined the family business properly. We could start you in an entry-level leasing role." Right on cue, my phone rang. "Amanda, Executive Director **. "I need to take this," I said, standing. "Really, Sarah," my mother sighed. "Your little rental office can survive an hour." I answered and turned back toward the table. "Amanda, you're on speaker." "Ms. Winters, the Global Towers acquisition is complete. All 300 luxury properties are now under your control, including Bennett Investment Holdings." Silence slammed into the room. Victoria's mimosa glass slipped from her fingers, shattering across the table. Champagne soaked into the deed she had just been celebrating. My father's face drained of color. "Thank you, Amanda," I said calmly. "Release the announcement." I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Then I paused. "And yes," I added without turning, "that includes this mansion." Behind me, no one spoke. Then the giant television on the dining room wall flickered on. Breaking business news. The news anchor's voice filled the stunned silence. "In a shocking move that is reshaping the global luxury real estate market, Global Towers International has completed the largest private property acquisition of the decade. The company's previously low-profile CEO, Sarah Winters, has officially acquired over 300 premium properties worldwide, including the entire Bennett investment portfolio." Victoria made a choking sound. "Winters, but you're a Bennett." "I changed it legally last year," I said calmly. "I didn't want the family name influencing my business." On the screen, Images of glass skyscrapers and luxury developments flashed one after another. The deal is valued at approximately $4.2 billion, the anchor continued. Industry experts say Winters built her empire quietly over the past 7 years, beginning with a revolutionary property management software platform that is now considered the gold standard in high-end real estate operations. My mother's hand trembled against her wine glass. That little program you were always working on. The one you told me was a waste of time, I replied. My father staggered back into his chair. 4.2 billion. And growing, I said. The anchor continued. Sources confirm that several Bennett-managed developments had recently been flagged internally for safety and compliance risks. Global Towers has stated that immediate structural reviews and corrective measures are already underway. Victoria's head snapped toward me. You had no right to look into our properties. I met her stare. Actually, I had every right. I became majority stakeholder 3 weeks ago, quietly. My father's voice shook. That's impossible, I would have known. You didn't even know your flagship project had structural faults, I said. Sterling Square would have faced lawsuits within months, possibly criminal investigations. Victoria went pale. That's not true. I held up my phone and turned the screen toward them. Inspection reports, internal emails, payoff trails. I know about the bribes to inspectors, the falsified safety approvals, the corners you cut to save money. You wouldn't dare, my father started. I already did, I interrupted. Those files went to my legal team the moment the acquisition closed. The anchor continued talking, unaware of the family collapse happening beneath the broadcast. Global Towers has announced a complete leadership restructuring of all newly acquired properties. CEO Sarah Winters is known in industry circles for strict compliance standards and a zero-tolerance corruption policy. Mother whispered, all this time we thought you were struggling. All this time, I said softly, I was buying the company you thought I needed a job from. My phone buzzed again. Stock alerts, market surge, investor congratulations. Father looked at Victoria desperately. Tell her you can help. You know property management. No, I said firmly. She knows how to spend money, not protect lives. Victoria's eyes filled with angry tears. You're doing this just to humiliate us. No, I said. I'm doing this because your negligence could have killed people. The house suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had closed in around their illusion of power. Amanda's voice came through my earpiece again. Board meeting in 30 minutes. The mayor's office is asking for a statement regarding Sterling Square. On my way, I said. Mother stood up, reaching for me. Sarah, wait, we can talk about this as a family. I looked at her hand, then at the table where they had just handed me a studio apartment-like charity. We are talking as a business now, I said. On the television, my professional headshot appeared beside the headline. The silent mogul, Sarah Winters revealed as real estate powerhouse. Father stared at the screen like he didn't recognize me. I walked toward the exit. Oh, I added, pausing at the doorway. Victoria, you might want to stop planning that wedding photo shoot here. She blinked. What? This mansion is being repurposed. For what? She asked weakly. A women-led tech innovation center, I said. Seems like a better investment. I stepped outside into the sunlight. Behind me, the empire that had always looked down on me was collapsing in absolute silence. 2 weeks later, the view from my office stretched across the entire skyline. Glass towers reflected the afternoon sun, each one carrying the new Global Towers emblem where the Bennett logo once stood. The city looked different from up here. Smaller, manageable, honest. I stood beside the window, arms folded, watching construction cranes already surrounding Sterling Square. Safety crews, engineers, inspectors, real professionals moved with purpose. No shortcuts, no hidden reports, no lies. My intercom buzzed softly. Ms. Winters, your father is here again. I didn't turn around. Is he alone? Yes, I paused for a moment, then exhaled. Send him up. The man who entered my office barely resembled the powerful executive who once controlled boardrooms and family dinners with the same cold authority. His suit was still expensive, but wrinkled. His posture no longer straight. Pride had weight when it was falling. Sarah, he started, then corrected himself. Ms. Winters. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Sit. He placed a folder in front of me, with hands that were trying not to shake. I've brought a restructuring proposal, he said. If we could retain partial operational control of a few regional properties, Victoria could. Victoria could what? I asked calmly. Host ribbon cuttings. His jaw tightened. I opened the folder, scanning the pages. Numbers inflated, risk projections ignored. The same careless optimism that nearly destroyed lives at Sterling Square. You didn't prepare this, I said. Silence. You hired consultants to make it look professional. His shoulders dropped. We're trying. No, I replied. You're trying to get back what you lost without admitting why you lost it. He leaned forward, desperation replacing pride. Your sister isn't handling this well. You mean she isn't handling consequences? Our accounts are frozen. There are legal reviews, investigations. Yes, I said. That happens when financial misconduct and safety violations surface during a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. His voice lowered. We could face charges. You might, I said evenly. If the evidence leads there, that part is no longer up to me. It's in the hands of regulators now. The weight of that truth settled between us. A soft knock interrupted. Come in, I said. My mother walked in slowly, Victoria just behind her. Gone were the bright designer colors. Gone was the effortless arrogance. Stress had a way of stripping people down to who they really were. Ms. Winters, my mother said, her voice careful. Victoria didn't speak at all. I remained standing. To what do I owe this visit? We wanted to apologize, my mother said quickly. For everything, for underestimating you, for how we treated your work. For mocking it, Victoria added quietly. I studied them for a long moment. Do you understand, I asked, that this was never about respect at the dinner table? They stayed silent. This was about decisions that put tenants at risk, families, children, people who trusted your buildings to be safe. Victoria's eyes filled. I didn't know it was that serious. That, I said, is exactly the problem. I tapped my tablet, and the screen on the wall lit up redevelopment plans. The Bennett mansion is now legally owned by Global Towers. Renovation begins next month. It will become a tech and business innovation center for women-led startups. Legal paperwork has already been filed. My mother's lips trembled. That was our home. It was an asset, I said, and it will now serve a purpose that creates opportunity instead of ego. Victoria swallowed. Where are we supposed to go? I brought up a property listing. Global Towers has several apartments available for lease at market rate. Background checks and financial verification apply to everyone equally. They stared at the screen. Then I pulled up one more listing. A studio on Cedar Street, I said calmly. You once said it suited me perfectly. Victoria closed her eyes. This is revenge, she whispered. No, I said. This is structure, accountability, law. I stepped closer to the window, the skyline behind me glowing gold in the late afternoon light. You built an empire on inheritance and image, I continued. I built one on systems, compliance, and data. One survives audits, the other collapses under them. My father looked 10 years older. Is there anything we can do? Yes, I said without turning. Cooperate with investigators, take responsibility, and learn how business actually works. Silence filled the office. Finally, I faced them again. My legal team will be in touch regarding remaining proceedings. Amanda will escort you out. They left quietly. No shouting, no drama. Just the sound of consequences, closing a door behind them. I returned to my desk. Another message flashed across my screen. Forbes cover confirmed asterisk. Global towers stock up 12%. Sterling Square reconstruction ahead of schedule. I allowed myself one small smile. Not because they had fallen, but because the system had held. Justice didn't come from emotion. It came from evidence, contracts, and signatures in the right places. And this time, I owned all of them. 3 months later, the courtroom was silent except for the shuffle of papers and the low hum of the air conditioning. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside my legal team, dressed in a charcoal suit, posture straight, expression calm. Across the aisle sat former executives of Bennett Investments, including my father and 2 senior board members. Victoria was not listed as a defendant, but her name had come up in testimony more than once. This was no longer a family matter. This was corporate negligence, financial misconduct, and endangerment. The evidence had been methodical, inspection reports buried, safety violations signed off without review, payments routed through shell vendors, emails recovered, timelines reconstructed. Facts didn't care about family dinners. The judge adjusted her glasses as she reviewed the final summary presented by the regulatory prosecutor. Global Towers International, she said, looking briefly in my direction, initiated internal audits immediately after acquisition and voluntarily disclosed violations to authorities. Their cooperation prevented further public risk. She shifted her attention to the defense. Bennett Investments leadership failed to maintain legal safety standards across multiple residential developments. Financial penalties, executive bans, and ongoing criminal review are warranted. A quiet murmur spread across the room. My father closed his eyes. The ruling continued. Heavy fines, permanent disqualification from serving on corporate property boards, civil liability for damages related to Sterling Square, pending criminal investigation for falsified safety certifications. Not prison, not today. But the empire they built through shortcuts was legally dismantled. Clean, documented, final. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Ms. Winters, did you plan this takeover as revenge? I paused before stepping into my car. No, I said clearly. I planned it as reform. Do you have anything to say to the Bennett family? Yes, I replied. I hope they finally understand that leadership without responsibility is just liability in a suit. I got into the car and closed the door on the noise. Weeks later, the former Bennett mansion reopened under a new name. The Winters Innovation Foundation. Inside, young founders pitched ideas. Women in tech led workshops. Startup teams worked late under bright lights where crystal chandeliers once hung over silent dinners filled with judgment. I walked through the main hall during the opening event, remembering the brunch table that used to sit here. Same building. Different legacy. Amanda joined me near the stage. Full occupancy in the first accelerator cohort. Investors are lining up. Good, I said. Make sure legal compliance training is mandatory for all funded startups. She smiled. Of course. My phone buzzed softly. A news alert. Global Towers, ranked 1 most ethical property group. I looked around at the founders networking, laughing, building. This was wealth. Not paintings bought for ego. Not houses owned for status. But systems that worked. Opportunities shared. Damage repaired. That evening, back in my office overlooking the skyline, city lights stretching endlessly below, I recorded a short message for the foundation's launch stream. I looked directly into the camera. Success isn't about proving people wrong, I said calmly. It's about building something so strong that no one can break it through corruption, ego, or neglect. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told your work didn't matter, keep going. Quiet work still builds empires. I smiled slightly. And if you believe in stories where hard work wins over shortcuts, where accountability matters, and where smart decisions change lives, make sure to like, subscribe and follow this journey, because we're just getting started. I ended the recording. Outside the window, the Global Towers logo glowed across the skyline. Not inherited, earned, and protected by the one thing her old world never respected: the law. 6 months after the verdict, the skyline looked different again. Not because new towers had risen, but because the name Bennett had quietly disappeared from every building it once crowned. In its place stood a brand now associated with compliance audits, tenant safety programs, and transparent reporting. Reputation, I had learned, could be rebuilt the same way it was destroyed, one decision at a time. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Amanda stepped into my office. "Sterling Square is fully reopened," she said, handing me the tablet. "0 violations on final inspection. Tenant satisfaction ratings are the highest in the district." I nodded, scrolling through photos of families moving into the once condemned property. Kids running through the courtyard, balconies reinforced, fire exits clearly marked, systems working the way they always should have. "Any update on the civil settlements?" I asked. "All victims' families accepted compensation packages," she said. "And the court-mandated long-term safety monitoring funded by the former Bennett executive liability pool." Accountability didn't just mean punishment. It meant repair. Later that afternoon, I received an email I hadn't expected. From Victoria Bennett. Subject: I was wrong. I stared at the name for a long moment before opening it. No excuses, no manipulation, just a short message. She had started taking certification courses in property compliance and urban safety planning. Court-mandated community service had placed her with a housing safety nonprofit. For the first time in her life, she was seeing buildings not as assets, but as homes. I didn't reply immediately. Growth didn't need applause. It needed consistency. Weeks passed. The Innovation Foundation expanded into 2 more cities. Startups funded through the program began developing affordable housing tech, safety monitoring AI, and tenant rights platforms. Systems that would prevent the exact negligence that once slipped through Bennett investments. One evening, I visited the old Cedar Street studio. Not to live, just to stand outside it. The small balcony, the cracked sidewalk, the place they once thought defined my limits. It had been the only property I could afford when my software was still just code and caffeine. The only space where no one laughed at my ideas. I smiled. Success had never started in a mansion. It started in rooms where no one believed in you, except yourself. My phone rang. Amanda again. "Mayor's office confirmed," she said. "They're nomming the new city housing oversight initiative after Global Towers' compliance model." "Good," I said, watching the sunset reflect off distant glass towers. "Make the documentation open source." "You want competitors to use it." "I want tenants safe," I replied. After the call ended, I looked out over the city that once felt out of reach. Power used to mean control. Now it meant responsibility. And the real victory wasn't that my family lost everything. It was that the system they abused could no longer be abused by anyone else. The empire stood stronger than ever. Not because it dominated, but because it protected. 1 year later, the annual Global Urban Development Summit filled the largest convention hall in the city. Architects, regulators, developers, and housing advocates from around the world gathered under one roof. Panels discussed sustainable construction, transparent governance, and tenant-first policies. The industry had changed, not perfectly, but permanently. And for the first time, the change had a measurable blueprint. I stood backstage, reviewing my keynote notes on a tablet. Not numbers, not profit charts. Impact reports. Safety compliance up 38% across partnered cities. Tenant emergency response times cut in half. Fraud reporting hotlines established in 12 countries. Independent oversight boards created using our open source governance model. Amanda peeked through the curtain. Full house, media from 5 countries, and, she hesitated slightly, your family is here. I looked up. In the audience. Yes, quietly seated in the back. I nodded once. They're allowed. Growth sometimes looked like distance. Sometimes it looked like accountability. And sometimes it looked like people choosing to sit and listen instead of stand and command. The host announced my name. I walked onto the stage as the lights brightened and applause rolled through the hall. Not loud like celebrity applause. Steady, respectful. I began without drama. A year ago, my company acquired hundreds of properties that were failing the people who lived in them. Today, those same properties are being used as case studies in how to rebuild trust through transparency. The screen behind me displayed before and after images. Broken systems replaced with documented compliance. Anonymous tenants now speaking openly in interviews about safe homes. Real estate, I continued, is not about buildings. It's about responsibility. When leadership ignores that, people get hurt. When leadership respects it, communities thrive. I spoke about legal frameworks, independent audits, and why ethics had to be engineered into business models, not added later as damage control. Near the end, I paused. I was once told I wasn't suited for leadership in this industry, I said calmly. Not visible enough, not traditional enough, not loud enough. A faint smile touched my lips. It turns out you don't have to be loud when your work speaks in data, safety records, and lives protected. The audience stood in applause. Not for revenge. Not for wealth. But for reform that worked. As I stepped off stage, I glanced toward the back of the hall. My father sat still, hands folded. My mother beside him, eyes glossy. Victoria watched the screen replay of tenant interviews, not defensive, not dismissive. Just listening. I didn't go over. Some distances existed for a reason. Outside the convention center, the evening sky glowed violet over the city skyline. Global Towers logos shimmered on buildings that now pass the strictest safety codes in the country. The Innovation Foundation had funded over 200 startups. Compliance programs we designed were becoming international standards. This was no longer about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving a better way right. I got into the car as Amanda reviewed tomorrow's schedule. Investor call at 9, Foundation expansion press conference at noon, and the documentary crew wants a closing quote for the series. I looked out the window as the car pulled into traffic. Tell them this, I said. Success isn't domination. It's building systems so fair and strong that no one has to fight just to be safe. The city lights blurred past. An empire built quietly. A legacy built legally. And a future no one could take away because it wasn't based on power. It was based on principle. The documentary crew arrived at headquarters the following week. They didn't want staged boardroom shots or skyline drone footage. They wanted the story behind the systems, the why behind the empire. So I took them somewhere unexpected. Sterling Square. A year ago, it had been a liability buried under falsified reports. Today, children played in a courtyard redesigned with safety-certified materials. Parents sat on benches under proper lighting. Fire exits were clearly marked. Elevators passed inspection with documented logs anyone could access. This, I told the camera, is what compliance looks like when it's treated as a priority instead of a cost. We walked through the lobby where a digital display showed live maintenance tracking, safety certifications, and tenant feedback scores. Transparency isn't a slogan, I said. It's infrastructure. Later, back at headquarters, the interviewer asked the question everyone eventually asked. Do you forgive your family? I considered that carefully. Forgiveness isn't the same as restoring control, I said. Personally, I wish them growth. Professionally, the law decides consequences. That distinction mattered. Because emotions built drama. But systems built stability. Months passed. Global towers expanded into public housing partnerships, helping cities modernize oversight processes. Our compliance model became required reading in urban development programs. Investors who once chased only profit now asked about risk ethics and tenant safety scores before signing deals. One evening, Amanda brought in the final audit summary for the year. 0 major violations across the entire portfolio, she said. Independent review confirmed. I signed the report. Not with pride. With responsibility. Because staying ethical was harder than becoming successful. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. 1 year since the brunch. I almost laughed. That morning had felt like humiliation, wrapped in crystal glassware. Now it felt like a turning point history would never see, because the real story wasn't the inheritance. It was what I built after refusing to accept it. I stood by the office window as night settled over the city. Lights filled apartments we now knew were safe. Families slept in buildings that passed real inspections. Young founders worked late in the innovation foundation spaces, designing tools that would keep future companies accountable. That was the real empire. Not towers. Not money. But systems no ego could corrupt again. I picked up my phone and recorded one final message for the documentary's closing scene. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or handed less than you deserve, remember this. You don't need permission to build something better. You don't need approval to do things right. Quiet work, smart strategy, and integrity outlast noise, shortcuts, and arrogance every single time. I gave a small, confident smile. And if stories about real power, smart moves, and rightful outcomes inspire you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow, because the next chapter is always being built. The camera light blinked off. Outside, the global tower's skyline glowed, not as a symbol of dominance, but as proof that doing things the right way is the strongest position of all.